And so once again, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining this afternoon. I'm Davidová. I'm a lecturer at the World School of Architecture, and I'm a chair of an NGO called Collaborative Collective. I'm educated as an architect, mainly within systems-oriented design and performance-oriented architecture. And I did my PhD within the same field as well, which actually, as a conclusion, I sort of ratified a new field, which I call systemic approach to architecture performance. And within this field, I'm trying to work and develop it, and I will talk a bit more about it. Wait, there is somebody trying. No, okay. Then let's talk about the first thing. I will be mainly talking in a plural, and the reason is not that I think I am the emperor. But the thing is that most of my work I have ever done was not done only by me. It has been done in collaboration with many different colleagues. Some of them are connected here. Thank you. So, so the plural, which within the scope of this lecture, there has been actually often so many collaborators. I will not be able to name them all, but they all have credit, and they all joined within their expertise and have their work has been always very valuable. So I would start to discuss the way I'm working. As I'm saying, I work mainly with collaborative design and co-design. And within my life, I managed to realize my projects mainly by actually joining academy and practice and my NGO, when each of the actors played different roles and they enabled different things. Within that field, I have been using systems-oriented design. I have been designing performance, and all of that has been always joined in research by design and something I call real life co-design laboratory, which is the interventions or the realizations has been in real life, though it has been educational projects or purely idealistic projects. They have been always realized and developed through the real stakeholders. I have been prototyping those projects, which I call that those projects are hyper-objective because they are systemic. They relate to different systems and engage with social and environmental systems, political systems, and technological systems, and so on and so on. So this is an example of a hyper-objective project. This has been actually a project mainly through my practice, though we had architectural assistants from education who have been engaging in that, and it has been engaged with NGO and practice. The project is called Villa Sofia. The project is a house. Well, but it's not only a house, it is a house that is operated by artificial intelligence, and it communicates to, or is meant to communicate with the outside world. The project is meant to actually generate social security of system of the cities and more. But it operates basic things like it can play a piano for you, or it can moderate the climatic performance and so on. I will get to this project at the later stage of this talk. Why is this not working? Yes. So most of my projects focused on ecosystems, and they have been co-designed with larger communities, and the communities have been human and non-human. The synergy has been done through networks like biocorridors with biotopes across the city, to simple systemic hyper-objective interventions, and they have been generative through DIY. There has been also engagement of human public with different events when the public have co-created the project after the intervention has been placed. So it has been developed. What I'm discussing, those prototypes are time-based, and they generate co-living, edible landscape, and what I call like co-performance, because all of those aspects and actors perform together. So when I get to systemic approach to architectural performance, it focuses on landscape, social and cultural ecology in a built environment, and it is trying to generate the transition towards post-anthropocene, which means biodiversity and climate adaptation of our new coming era. This is done through architectural and urban design, but not only that, it integrates many other process-based fields, because it is using holistic approach, and it is performed in a real-life co-design laboratory, which means that the projects, first we place prototypes into urban environment or whatever environment, but those prototypes are generative, and they are co-designed within and through the real life. So when I get back to this image, this is actually not my image, but my colleague allowed me to use that. It is showing how our cities have been developed. You would have a strict boundary between nature and human beings, as if human beings were not part of nature, and still many, and definitely when I was kid, it would be natural to think that humans are something different than nature, which is absolutely impossible to understand, because we are biological bodies, and we do animal societies as same as whatever other species, and we have our specifics as same as other species. So when we look at this image, this is picture from Cardiff, just close to the Welsh School of Architecture. This shows perfect example how you have a big motorway, and you have different you have cycling path, and you have fence between that towards the park that is actually quite biodiverse. Part of it is even natural park, and it has very strong habitat. Then you have that fence. Then you have a motorway that kills whatever would want to transit to the human park. You have even a stone wall dividing that, and then you would have humans, as is those two parts have nothing in common, and we have to separate that. So what I'm trying to work with systemic approach to architectural performance is actually co-living with other species, with urban and other cultural landscape. As I said, systemic approach to architectural performance is synergy of several process-based fields. It includes systems-oriented design, performance-oriented architecture, prototypical ecosystemic interventions, time-based design, something what I called non-anthropocentric ecosystemic services, and then co-design, co-creation, and the generativeness through DIY. So if I get to systemic approach to architecture, to systems-oriented design, Birger Stefansson has explained the position in the field of systems-oriented design as somewhere between systems thinking and design thinking, design practice and systems practice, with being at the design practice in the most, in the closest part. But what is also quite important point of that is that the systems thinking and systems practice is met with research by design, and systems thinking and systems practice is met with action research. So what is my field in this is actually joining the research by design through action research and doing those systemic interventions that generate leverage points. So you have like small input, but it can generate large output through its generativeness. So systems-oriented design is using a tool that is called gigamapping. That is using actually several different approaches of coming from storytelling, different diagrammings, timelines, scenarios, collages, rich pictures, even mind mapping. And when you relate all those things and specifically interpret these relationships, you generate something called rich design research space, which is actually joining people together. So it is the mapping is collaborative, and it is integrating different viewpoints and searches for synergy. This is my diploma I did with Birger some 15 years ago or so, which was city intervention into the city of Oslo. So that was my first gigamap I was ever doing. I will get to that now when I would get to how do I use systems-oriented design. So something that is quite critical is if you, oh, that is pointing, that is not working. If you look at something called minimap, that would be small map when the people that are about to join the collaborative workshop first map their own universe, because I believe first you need to understand yourself, your agendas, and what are your interests within the issues, specifically when it relates to stakeholders. Then that get related in the gigamap. So people go through the gigamap and relate their minimaps within the minimaps. So they start understanding each other's universes. And then gets the full-scale prototype that is placed in the real-life environment that generates reflection, and the reflection generates again action. So you update your prototype, update your research, and also it generates reflection and action from the people in the real-life environment. So this is something. This is an example of minimap from the project of the pavilion we were doing with my students. So we would combine this small mapping with sketch modeling. The visual information here is very important because people understand the images and models better than if you just write words. But yeah, it's you have to mix because some people just don't want to draw in whatever way. But yeah. So that would be the minimap. This is the sketch model, and this is already when within our teams we have been cutting our minimaps and relating them into Gigamap, where the students were searching relationships between their own interests and generating a collaborative project together. So that would be the discussion. So that was the final Gigamap, and the Gigamap for exhibition to actually discuss the project with the audience. And there is the prototype that has been built, and the Gigamap was exhibited with it. This would we took those approaches further from a purely studio into local pubs in the locations where we were planning interventions, and started co-creating with local communities. So we actually understand the locality better with local stakeholders, and also engage them in co-creation, so they actually generate what they want. So there is not designer's authorship. Designer is rather something like a facilitator. There would be a lot of techniques, like first would be maybe first mind mapping. What is it we want to do? Then I would ask for another co-design meeting. I would ask people to print out referential images, or so people understand pictures what they want to discuss. That helps to avoid a lot of problems, specifically with the people who don't want to draw. So that has been printed and related. Then those mappings have been digitalized and drawn over again, and then computerized, also sketching in computers with getting fabrication data that have been prototyped and built. This is responsive insect hotel. I will get to that further. This would have been Gigamap, that the result of that mapping that has been organized by me and exhibited together with the intervention, so every stakeholder can find themselves. You can see there will be human and non-human stakeholders and discussions what they want, and then what different actions they relate in. So you would have certain feedback loops, some of them are more, some of them are less complex between different actors, and you understand who relates to what and who does what. And then of course the public discussion with that map, and that is the insect hotel. This would be actually, if you have good weather, that's the best. You just start gigamapping in public space, engaging stakeholders. If it's a spot where people go, so you engage with them real life and start mapping and building models and generating collective understanding, and then you build in that public space, and people co-create together. This is an example of my latest workshop for the municipality of Prague 22, where local stakeholders co-create regeneration of certain land use. So this is the part where they all draw their minimaps in their corner, and then each start relating together. This shows better with my students here in Cardiff, where students are relating with local stakeholders and discussing and developing their projects. This would be then the studio session, when they are relating their built prototypes, so they generate synergetic projects all together. And this would be again in the local pub in Cardiff, discussing with the community. Very often, if you organize, we have organized some workshops, co-design workshops in the library, typically people don't come. If you just intervene to local pub and you have weird things and you are doing weird things, people start to be curious and very often join and comment and start discussing and co-creating. So very often intervening the spaces where people are, rather than trying to organize some event to which nobody really comes, is working better. So if I get to performance-oriented architecture, performance-oriented architecture in my work is mainly about responsiveness. What you see on the screen is Norwegian traditional facade. That facade has a special performance. Those planks work when there is dry and hot weather, and they get narrow when the humidity is high and the temperature is low, which means that the structure is airing in wanted condition and closing in unwanted conditions. I have been developing this into a screen. You see the simulation of the air ventilation. This is environment responsive screen that is airing much more than the traditional facade in dry and hot condition, and closing in high relative humidity and low temperature. But you can see that the panels can be each under each other, is because the wood from the center of the tree trunk warps less, or warps more than the wood from the edge. So you can actually generate the variation of the warping. Okay. Now nothing is working. Okay. Okay. This is the prototype. You can see it's pretty green, and the thing why it is green, it is actually a good thing. It is co-design of the performance with algae. This algae makes it warp more when the relative humidity is low, and prevents it from warping the other direction when the relative humidity is high. And this is a moisture meter showing what is the moisture content when you have algae on the screen and where you don't. You can see that that this is actually not only performance, this is not only responsiveness to the physical factors, but it is also responsiveness to the living factors, whereas the screen also generates a surface and habitats for that algae or lichen as well. This is second prototype improving the performance, and this is already the insect hotel I discussed that is using this performance for moderating climates for different species of insects. So the difference of warping within the panels generates variety. Also, that the insect hotel is circular means that some insects prefer sunny side, some insects prefer shadow, some prefer wind, some don't want wind, and so on, so on. So discussing with landscape ecologist, she just suggested to us, if you want to support biodiversity, generate the largest variety you can, which would be sunny, windy, shady, and so on, with also like all of those, if you see this, these are the chambers inside that. Each of them generates different climate, because all those different panels are from different parts of the tree trunk, so they work different ways, so they are airing different way, and that generates a chimney effect of that insect hotel. Coming back to that master thesis I discussed, that was the first I truly started to work with performance. This is an installation to the city of Oslo that is moderating sound and light environment in the city whilst absorbing radio waves. So this installation actually moves due to shape memory alloy based on temperature, and it is sort of diffracting and refracting sound and light waves. And the idea behind it is like we all don't mind the waterfall sound, no matter of the volume, but we all mind the sound of motorway. So that is a discussion, like if you have complex input, it is actually pleasant input. If you have simple repetitive input, it is disturbing, or let's say annoying, and it is not about the volume, but about the complexity. This is a working prototype that has been reflecting that sound. The joint design. That time it was new things to 3D print the joints, so that was very successful. And you would think that it was almost utopian project, and many people thought that I wouldn't find its place in practice. That was one of my first work task. I joined an office called Snoheta, and my task was together with the colleagues to work on design of the facade of this administration building, which has used a lot of my research from the diploma thesis. So getting forward. Oh, there is somebody joining. Getting forward, we get to the ecosystemic urban interventions or prototypical interventions. And what is common for them is generativeness. So you have intervention and they are leveraging. It's systemic interventions that are placed into leverage points and have generative output. So this little insect hotel, you would think is a small thing, generated a lot of input in the community. A lot of people started to care about their environment. A lot of people started to care about the fact that this central Prague locality is actually important biotope in on a biocorridor. And then, of course, there has been just a second, there are people waiting. No, that's chat. Okay. So this intervention generates change for supporting the biodiversity for human community, but also for non-human. It is just an insect hotel. In the same time, is a fast food restaurant for bats and birds in the neighborhood, and even like doing measures about bat species in there. There has been discussion that that will be actually the location. They really need to find the food on the way between one park and the other park, so it is generating connectivity within the city. Another insect hotel we did in Cyprus. actually using that woodworking on the opposite direction, because it's Mediterranean climate, so it's a very different and very different preferences. This is in front of the Cyprus University School of Architecture, and that one is just by the United Nations buffer zone, which though it is, I mean, very difficult political situation, what has happened with the United Nations buffer zone is actually that is excellent biocorridor across the city, very alive. No humans can go there, or only soldiers. It is a jungle in that is crossing the city, and has incredible biodiversity. So this insect hotel was an extension from that buffer zone into the city, supporting more co-living of humans and non-humans. This pavilion is working with the responsive wood concept. It is also based on the woodworking, and what this pavilion does is that when the relative humidity is high, which is at night, the wood absorbs the moisture, and when you have like those summer afternoons, urban heat islands effects, this pavilion start evaporate the moisture, and as the petals warp into propel, that generates the circulation of the humidified air, so it generates pleasant microclimate within otherwise quite almost arid conditions. That is another pavilion that has been developing this concept further through placing the paneling different way and generating more air circulating shapes. This responsive pavilion is more for human interaction. It was very sweet project. I was not the leader of this project, that was my colleague, but we got the task. We got like £100 budget for developing something for city festival that had to be like meeting place for the city festival, and I just said like, okay, we can just build it out of air, like with this money. So that's what we did. We made this balloon pavilion that was responding to weather conditions. It was lying down with the morning or night humidity. It was down. So when the city went to sleep, the pavilion went to sleep and lied down. And when the humidity was getting away, the pavilion stood up and was marking the meeting point for the events. This is the project I discussed in Slovutic. It's in Ukraine, where we were sort of Slovutic is a city that was built after the Chernobyl disaster to move the people who survived the accident into safe location. So those people, many of them still work at Chernobyl. They are taking daily train. And what has that region moved into is fantastic biodiversity that is actually like unprecedented within other civilized world. What is this project doing is actually engaging those people to live with that biodiversity and start appreciating biodiversity. I mean, their only future is ecotourism. The power plant is being closed, and it's just for visitors. And there are a lot of scientific conferences and a lot of scientific research going on biodiversity. Why not to actually engage people to take it as an advantage that they have something so precious which is nowhere else. this would be an sort of exhibition meeting point for the exhibition about woodcrafts, and we generated a meeting point on that chateau where we supported biodiversity to placing blooming plants on this prototype, co-created with local scouts. So when the spring was coming and this exhibition was opening, there were blooming plants inviting the first pollinators that were pretty hungry after winter. This would be sort of intervention on otherwise that time now very live, that time very dead riverside of Prague, where we did something we called instant park. That would be sort of what we call opportunistic use. It is for sitting, it is for playing. People were growing plants in it, they were grilling in it, they were sleeping in it. So it generated a lot of opportunities for multiple purposes and generated human engagement. Later on, now this area is actually as crowded that is no longer bearable. Time-based design. Time-based design. This is something I believe whoever deals with multiple stakeholders should consider. That is part of design management, and this is action diagram where you map. You of course integrate with stakeholders that are just popping in and out, but then you have stakeholders that really collaborate throughout the project, that have certain interests. You generate this action diagram where you clearly map what are the actions in the project and who is when taking part and who collaborates with who and what are the deadlines of it. It avoids a lot of confusion because if you talk to stakeholders, explain the project of their interest, they say, sure, yes, we want to be engaged. And suddenly you want something from them and they are very surprised you want something from them. So this is to give people a picture of what is going on, and you should be agreeing with them on that. Of course, everything goes a bit different way at the end, but giving you a picture of understanding what is attempted is always good. Time-based design, well, that was something I had to do before I did this. Before getting to this prototyping stage, I had to do a lot of planning, getting funds and all of those things. Then you are building, testing the structure real life. Then you are having discussions with public, you are getting input from public, and actually getting better understanding of your research through discussion with public, and of course engaging the audience. Then you are engaging different actors that in this case we had festivals where all the people that all the performers had to relate to the project when they were performing at the event. So they are actually co-creating the understanding of those performative objects and enriching them and putting input into later stages. So that would be another example. You see this image says it all. And nobody than this dancer could make it, right? This is landscape or landscape architect discussing the performance of the pavilion with the humidity and smell. And this is something that has been co-created by another stakeholder who just came along, and something we really got to understand is such interventions are critical for the biodiversity of the city, because you know, people put the needles on their windows so the birds cannot sit on it, because they would shit on their windows, or people are trying to avoid all biodiversity in their neighborhood, and then you have this bird who is flying through the city and has no place to sit, and they might die of exhaustion, and that's what they are actually often doing. So such a bird actually gave us an understanding what is the importance of such specific prototypes as well. And he became a mascot of our festival that was inviting people to the events. Another project, again, a building going over time. I will just go through that fast. This is seed bombing by the event. So you support the ecosystem first. You make an insect hotel. The insect have to eat something. So you make seed bombing of blooming species. Then again, the bats and birds eat the insects. So you are interacting with ecosystemic network. Also city gaming, understanding, if you don't generate human understanding that they want to co-live with other species, you will not make it to move from Anthropocene to post-Anthropocene if the people now sort of killing themselves by ruling the world will not actually accept that they have to share this space together in order of their survival. So that would be time-based design. This prototype is changing over time. It's generating habitats for algae and living its life. So it is getting diverse and diverse. And that's what is important about time-based design. What I also do is studies of traditional architecture. This typically I do that with traditional architecture from more extreme conditions, because those extreme conditions are now coming in a wide variety. We have extreme heat waves, we have extreme cool waves, we have extreme winds, extreme floods, extreme droughts, everything. And many of those traditional architectures have adapted to certain parts of those. So this is traditional architecture from Norway, being of extreme humid and cool conditions. So what has developed there is some sort of semi-interior spaces that are making some sort of insulation. It is space that is unclimatized. It is often breathing, sometimes more close, sometimes less close, and it is for doing life activities like you know, wood carving or socializing, things like this. In the time it is raining, it's something like a balcony we would have in Central Europe, but here it's more enclosed, and it offers habitats to other species as well. So this would be mapping how are the boundary penetrations for. This is a perfect spot for swallows or swifts. This sort of this interior space is called Svalgang. It can fold in and unfold based on the needs, whether you are loading a material, whether you need environmental protection, or you want to dry the stuff out and open it. So this is another example of this. This house can completely unfold into much smaller house, and it can totally look out if you want it. This would be more penetrable boundaries for different climatic settings. And this is algae that is living inside, so those spaces are extending habitats for other species. What I noticed, the more extreme climate, the more opportunities for habitats for different species it offers. this would be another responsive screen. And I have been giga mapping those sites and evaluating them, comparing hard data with soft data. This is hard measuring of moisture content, temperature, and relative humidity in semi-interior, exterior, and interior spaces, comparing summer and winter data, and comparing it with the performance of those of the uses and of the opportunities it offers. This would be another research for the boundaries of spaces like this, which are different way penetrable, and it depends on climate and depends on purpose. So, for instance, this wall in Portugal is generating cool environment in the city, so people can grow fruits there, which would be otherwise impossible in quite heated urban island. So I have been measuring and comparing this climatic data together with the biodiversity and what are the performances. This is a modernist example from Brazil, Lucio Costa. This is Oriental Mashrabia from Morocco. Those wooden screens actually absorb the relative humidity at night and evaporated during the day when they are cooling the air. So that's how those pavilions I discussed have been inspired. Those two are not so different, right? One is from Norway, one is from Morocco, but they offer similar opportunities for co-living and sort of moderation, generating different bioclimatic layers in a built environment, starting with fences, going to semi-interior spaces, or even interior spaces, so on. This is the responsive screen I discussed, and then comes my responsive screen that is answering different weather extremes from both hot and cold climates, using the performances of different traditional architectures developed over generation. This would be then the example from Cappadocia, where people lived together with pigeons, and this co-living was generating symbiosis. People lived on the bottom, pigeons lived on top, connected by the shaft. The pigeons heated up the space, so there was air ventilation generated for all those caves, and the pigeons received a habitat for their living, whilst the people used their droppings as a fertilizer in otherwise unfertile land, and got their caves ventilated. This would be then historical development of those caves. First, it was Christian culture that was hiding in caves due to political problems or religious problems, being in danger in the region. Then the Muslim culture came with their culture, and they no longer had to hide, so they developed the caves further on. They developed those terraces, and the caves, the internal caves, are inhabited in winter when the climate is very cold, or in summer when the climate is very hot, and the terraces are inhabited in autumn and spring, having another different climatic layers of the space. So that would be the mapping, and also co-living. There has been more species living with those cultures. This is quite a nice example from Moravian region, from my country. This is a wine cellars. You would have this you would have this sort of ground top of this cellar. You would have cave on the inside, and there would be algae living inside that. And the wine cellar owner said that who doesn't have the algae doesn't produce good wine. So, as for instance, those Cappadocian cultures I was showing, they managed to get the specific ventilation for producing the best quality of wines by co-living with pigeons. Those wine cellars in Moravia are generating similar performance by co-living with algae. This project actually shows, you know, like you don't start with research, you never start with research, you start with speculation. So this is a design speculation that we did in my practice for a competition entry of the Museum of Vernacular Culture that had to have specific climatic conditions and has to use as little energy as possible. So there has been then developing the design speculation about the responsive screen that would moderate the climate, and that you would live in the cave to keep the heat and using this performance. So there has been design speculation. We didn't win the competition, but it generated research questions for my research. This is a project where in some sort of part conclusion of such researchers proposing administrative center for the forests of the Czech Republic that are using caves for cooling, using edible landscape for its surfacing, and using the responsive screen for moderating the climates. Those units can disintegrate and reconnect based on environmental and social situation. This would be project from practice that has been informed a lot by those things, specifically by cave dwellings, going underground and going underground, and working with terrain and co-living with algae. I will get to that later stage. Now I would like to move to ecosystemic or non-anthropocentric ecosystemic services. So that is something different than ecosystem services, because ecosystem services typically target humans, and the sort of philosophy typically known for ecosystem services is that you generate that the ecosystem is of service to humans. So what we do is actually we are trying to generate the co-living situation. This is my colleague landscape ecologist who is just teaching a child how to do seed bombing with blooming species, and that child and that public event is generating services for solitary bees or bumblebees and other species. So it's not services that are only oriented to humans, though we are of course doing human services as well, specifically educating this kid. That mother is very happy that she has something to do with the kid, and the kid is very happy that it is learning something about ecosystem. So as I mentioned, this insect hotel is not only hotel that would provide habitation service to insect. It is also fast food restaurant for bats and birds, generating edible and habitable landscape for more species than you have the interaction farther and farther. So this is the eater. Those would be the eaters. We would do ecosystems mapping to actually watch who is living there. This would be another service, again integration of humans and other species. This is open street city celebration, where we would put a table and teach kids how to mix bird food in the autumn. It is a celebration in September, so just about the time to teach that it is not good to give rice to the birds, but you should mix the local species that grow on the local fields, because that is what the birds adapted to over their generations. Again, a service like city furniture for not only humans. This is a beautiful example here from Cardiff that is showing that actually this restaurant is not only the restaurant for that lady, it is also a restaurant for the bumblebees. And you know, when we have those complex situations, it's always, if you can support more stakeholders, it's always better than to support only one. This is when the nature is generating its services on its own. It's generating the corridors for bumblebees and taking its habitats here as well. This would be again the advantage of having an NGO. You have certain law body. So, for instance, we have been placing complaints about Prague City Metropolitan Plan because there has been fragmentations in biocorridors across the city. So suddenly, if you have an NGO, you have more power. So sometimes you can change things through education. Sometimes it's easier to be chair of your NGO. Sometimes you can accomplish things through practice, and the best is to synergize all. This is a beautiful example from the city of Aarhus. So this is open air museum where this bird is living in this construction, and the question is. In last years, many civil engineers have spent a lot of research on how to prevent different building surfaces and facades from being inhabited by other species, specifically birds, so the birds don't nest in the facade systems. Instead of spending time on developing facades that would actually generate those opportunities, and one wouldn't mind. And that would be from the cohabitation point of view, and then I can get to the point where this co-creation through cohabitation can actually play its role. This is the example of the practice project where okay, we took some land for building the house, but we are extending the landscape actually by the surface, and it is invaded by a local ecosystem to expand the habitat. The design itself is co-created together with the landscape. It is sweeping around the landscape and following the slope. So the geographical condition co-created the design of the house to be in the synergy. This fun, actually, that is something that makes me sad. It was designed to be inhabited by algae, and then it was for a long time I was succeeding in convincing the client. At the end, they changed their mind. However, the algae took over anyway, and it lives in this pool. Also, specifically in Central European condition, we never struggled with droughts. We struggle with droughts extremely lately. extending the ecosystem with water surfaces is nowadays becoming critical, and generating habitats for other species thanks to that is crucial at the moment. Habitats and also drinkable landscape for other species. Of course, this project has been co-created with the clients. With the specific thing I mentioned, this has been gigamapping on how to generate artificial intelligence called SysLoop. So this project is in constant development of both the client and also of the artificial intelligence that is observing that house, and at some point it will probably kill the client, but that's his business. So this is the meeting point, and these are the racks in the house that are organizing the house, and also storing the alarm system for the future city system. So, for instance, the fun performance is that this piano is robotic and can play what you decided to play, but also you have sensors that are observing your emotions about that play, and it can change thing for you and so on. And this is then the connection which is planned for generating the system across the city, so that can be city security, like COVID or things like this for smart cities. The co-creation here is on this screen is with the algae. Of course, this algae, except that it takes over with its habitation, it is co-designing the performance of this screen. Therefore, it co-moderates the climate. So you are suddenly co-designing with the algae, and very well. This tree house is living with the tree. It is self-standing structure that is attached to the tree, so it dances in the wind with the tree, and it has a platform that is extending the ground with moss. So we are extending the ecosystem and generating habitats for other species, whilst when we want to be there, we just put the fabric over and have moss bed, whilst this moss is otherwise very happy to live there. Of course, co-designing with public, when you just the discussion always like drop into the place where you are designing and engage whatever is in place. They usually take part. They never come if you invite them to the meeting. Co-creating with model making, explaining to public, co-designing with them, and this will be co-designing with these little kids when you really start building. So these kids we kept building. I mean, that would be probably. That it has been in Ukraine where those things are possible, that you keep a building and the kids are already playing on that. That's not too much possible at other places, but those kids perfectly told us what to do and where to put the lock so they can play the best. Again, here co-creating with local scouts that have built the structure for us and kept updating it with those little pockets that were holding onions of early blooming plants for early pollinators. And over the winter, before the exhibition started, they have been very creative in making bird foods, updating it all the time. It was just like their thing and their responsibility. Then invading the gallery space with the same structure. And what is the generative important part about those prototypes is that then we engrave the QR codes into those prototypes, and people scan that. You see here, when people scan that, they get to our website and they have DIY recipes how to make those interventions themselves here. This is parametric design. People download Grasshopper code. They are explained how to adapt the parametric code to their parameters, to the size of the tree and so on, and how to reproduce those prototypes themselves. So if I start concluding, this has been, there are many more process-based fields within this field, but those have been the most important sort of fields I wanted to discuss. It's just like a sample extra. This is the last project. We are working with my NGO for municipality of Prague 22, where we have been co-designing with very difficult situation of local stakeholders. Seems like everybody is getting happy, and this project are integrating all those mentioned fields. Plus, I'm starting to work with integrating token economy. So it means that the pollinators can get tokens for pollinating your gardens, and for actually for those tokens, then you have to use those tokens to expand meadows for the pollinator, or generating those interactive systems and feedback loops across the human and the non-human stakeholders. So that is something that is in progress now. Now I would start concluding. This is a gigamap I did some time ago, but what I mapped were different agents within those performative systems, and what I mapped those relationships and some more complex feedback loops. I concluded that the most engaged projects are also the most beneficial to humans. So if you engage others, you generate benefits for everybody. So I would like to discuss something, some movement for transition from human-centered design to non-anthropocentric design. And that would be then the transition from post-anthropocene towards biodiversity and climate change adaptation. And this I'm doing through research by design and through ecosystemic prototypical interventions and their hyperobjectivity. So this transition towards post-anthropocene is focusing on cross-species co-living, that would be dwelling and edible landscape, analog and digital, or let's say biodigital co-design for the adaptation, and multi-agency integration, which means that you have multiple agents generating and co-performing together, which is the co-design process. So that means I love Jan-Gel's work, but I would actually alarm for transition from cities from people towards participation of both biotic and abiotic agency to one co-performative ecosystem, which I call the real-life co-design laboratory. Then I would say that those hyper-objective media and agency are now building the ground for the field I am trying to develop, which I call systemic approach to architectural performance. So thank you. If you are interested in the field, you can follow me on ResearchGate. You can scan the QR code, of course. I will unshare the screen, or maybe give you time to scan the QR code and then unshare the screen, and I will be happy to take some questions.